You're telling me humans invented this? The salon executor's upper mandibles twitched. His four crystalline eyes locked onto the jar in front of him as though it contained a ticking explosive. Not only invented it, Marcus Rivera replied, lounging in a swivel chair far too comfortable for a galactic tribunal, but some of us prefer it. He stirred his cup with a smirk, letting the steam curl upward as Kex, the salon executioner assigned to oversee humanity's extinction, stared at the brown crystals with something approaching spiritual trauma. This is an affront to logic, Kex muttered. You took a perfectly respectable beverage, vaporized its soul, and packaged it like weaponized sadness. Is this what doomed your species? Marcus took a sip and grinned. Nope, that honor probably goes to karaoke night. The room they were in, technically a planetary extinction processing chamber, was dim, sterile, and filled with holographic legal documents. It reeked of formality, the kind of place built for signing death warrants, not debating caffeinated war crimes. Which, of course, was exactly why Marcus brought coffee. Kex carefully set down the jar like it might detonate. You do realize, he hissed, that your species is currently encircled by 12 Salon warships. We are here to inform you of the Council's judgment. Earth is scheduled for extinction. And yet, you're drinking coffee. Marcus leaned back further, heels on the table. Decoff, technically. I have a heart condition. You're insane. We prefer the term creatively adapted. Also, have you checked subsection 7.3, paragraph 4, line 16 of your extinction paperwork? Kex blinked, all four eyes, one at a time. It was like watching a chandelier glitch. Why would I? Just humor me. With a flick of one clawed digit, Kex summoned his data cube and scrolled. Then he froze. No, he said. No, this cannot be real. Oh, it's very real, Marcus said, savoring another sip. Humanity signed a contract, an old one, with death. The temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. The shadows thickened, and then it appeared. One moment the space beside Marcus was empty. The next, a figure in a pristine charcoal business suit materialized out of nowhere, as if it had always been there and reality just needed a moment to remember. Death, with a name tag that read, "Hello, I'm your inevitability." "Good morning," Death said in a voice that didn't echo so much as reverberate through ancestral memory. "I believe someone is attempting to poach my client." Kex made a noise that suggested multiple internal organs had just filed for early retirement. Marcus raised his mug. "Hey, boss. Coffee. Prefer tea? Actually," Death said, settling into a chair that hadn't existed moments earlier. "Earl Grey. Hot." Did Death just make a Star Trek reference? Kex whispered. "Oh, yeah," Marcus said. "Big nerd. You should see their comic collection. This is not how extinction hearings are meant to go." "Check the clause again," Marcus said, handing over a printed page labeled employment contract, Death, permanent position, in Comic Sans. "You're under contract with Death." "Since the beginning," Marcus said. "Why do you think we name constellations after our gods and monsters? We've been helping with Death's administrative load since we discovered Inc. They're excellent at organizing souls," Death said, "and truly impressive with Excel." Kex collapsed into the chair opposite them. "So what now?" "Now," Marcus said, passing over another form, "you fill this out. Form 88B, Acknowledgement of Cosmic Employment Contract. In triplicate, please write clearly. Boss gets cranky when paperwork is smudged." Kex had read a lot of documents in his centuries as a salon executor. Treaties, sanctions, galactic enforcement clauses. He'd even once read a 4,000-page regulation about proper planetary deconstruction protocols. But nothing had prepared him for this. He hovered over the clause highlighted by Marcus, reading it again for the 8th time. Subsection 7.3. Paragraph 4. Line 16. No execution may be carried out against any species currently under prior employment contract with a recognized universal force, provided said force retains jurisdiction and active claim. The next line was worse. See attached. Human Resource Agreement. Entity. Death primary. Eternity secondary. Bureau of Ends co-signed. Effective date. Onset of time. Kex made a sound like a compressed scream, trying to escape through his ribcage. This predates the council itself, he stammered. It's written in primal cosmic glyphs. I don't even have the vocal folds to pronounce some of these. Marcus sipped his coffee. We're old school like that. Across the room, Death casually examined a floating contract copy, their bony fingers flipping pages that glowed with runes and radiated mild existential dread. This clause, Death said, tapping a skeletal finger on the ancient paper, has been uncontested since the first black hole filed for retirement. Kex turned to them, desperate. This cannot be legal. Death tilted their head. Oh, but it is. It's not your law, executor. It's older than your species. It's bureaucracy that was filed when stars still needed approval forms to ignite. But why? Kex sputtered. Why would Death hire humans? Marcus leaned back, tapping his mug thoughtfully. Because we get it. Get what? Death isn't just an end. It's a process, a rhythm. We name it, ritualize it, paint it, joke about it. No, other species write songs about death, and makes death write songs about them. Kex blinked. That last part, long story, involves a bard, a black hole, and a really dramatic musical finale. Kex buried his face in two of his four-clawed hands. But you're mortal. You die all the time. Marcus grinned. Exactly, which means we respect the job. We live in a way that makes death matter. Death nodded. They understand entropy not just as a concept, but as an art form. But what about all the violence? Your species is chaotic and surprisingly well organized. Marcus added, you ever see a human wedding planner? We'd organize the apocalypse with matching binders and themed desserts. Death leaned forward. Executor, your council is bound by its laws. We are bound by older truths. Humanity has been under contract with my department since the invention of fire and funeral pyres. But what does that mean in practical terms? Kex whispered, defeated. It means, Marcus said cheerfully, you're going to need to fill out the try to extinct the Reaper's secretary form, and then probably some 17ths for contractual interference. Kex stared. Death produced a small wooden stamp from their inner jacket pocket, inked it, and pressed it onto the top of the floating contract. The word, enforced, glowed in flaming serif font. Now, Death said, rising from their seat, unless you'd like to test the legality of cosmic force employment law in a higher court, say, Eternity's Appeals Department, we suggest you accept this resolution. Kex stood up on trembling limbs. And if I do, then you live, Marcus said, and you get to go home with all your limbs and soul components intact. Death smiled, or gave the impression of one. And you get to tell the council that they almost deleted their universe's clerical department. Kex nodded slowly. I need to lie down. You can use the break room, Marcus offered. There's a couch and some chamomile that's only mildly cursed. Kex had imagined many things in his life. Planetary sieges, tribunal declarations, entire species kneeling before judgment. He had never imagined helping Death file paperwork in an office with a break room. Yet here he was. The HR department of Death's domain was not the fiery cavern of despair Kex expected. No lava, no screaming souls, no endless pits of writhing torment. Instead, it looked disturbingly normal. There were desks, cubicles, a water cooler, a motivational poster on one wall that read, Every end is a new filing opportunity. And then there was Marcus, seated at the heart of the storm. His desk was buried under stacks of parchment, and glowing tablets labeled things like soul, routing form, reincarnation department, and lost entity recovery dimensionally displaced. He was humming and filing faster than any AI Kex had ever seen. Form 9X, Marcus muttered, flipping through a packet with one hand while sipping from a skull-shaped mug with the other. Soul reassignment, formerly listed under accidental dematerialization, now flagged as quantum hiccup. Classic Tuesday. Kex stood awkwardly at the edge of the room, not sure where to sit, or if he should sit at all. Just pick a desk, Marcus called without looking up. Anyone that doesn't whisper, when touched. Whisper, you'll know. With great hesitation, Kex eased into a chair that seemed perfectly normal until it let out a slow, disappointed sigh. He immediately stood back up. Yeah, Marcus nodded. That one belonged to regret. Bit of a downer. Kex shifted to the next desk, which emitted a soft purring sound when he touched it. This one. Belonged to Joy. She retired. Good vibes. Before Kex could respond, Death materialized in the doorway, holding a clipboard. Marcus, do we still have that incident report from the Phoenix reboot cluster? Filed under our 4 rebirth-related regrets, Marcus replied, reaching into a drawer and tossing the form without looking. Color-coded too. Used the fire-resistant tabs. Death caught the folder midair, nodding. Excellent work. Kex finally found his voice. I still don't understand. Why do you have offices? Why do cosmic forces need administrators? Because, Marcus said, swiveling toward him, someone's got to make sure every end is processed properly. You think entropy just happens neatly? Please. Without us, the universe would be a pile of unclaimed soul forms, lost timelines, and delayed reincarnations. But humans? Why humans? Death stepped closer, clipboard now tucked under one arm. Because humans know what it means to make meaning out of chaos. They create rituals around death. Tell stories about it. Mourn, celebrate, laugh, cry, even meme it. Remember, Marcus added, we're the species that invented taxes and funerals. We know how to make anything depressing and procedural. Death smiled, and yet somehow comforting. A glowing red alarm blinked above one of the cubicles. A drawer popped open on its own and vomited paper. Marcus didn't miss a beat. Great. Another paradox backlog from Fate's department. You want me to handle it? Death offered. Nah, I've got it. Marcus cracked his knuckles. Time to file. With a practice motion, he dove into the mess, filling out forms at a speed that should have been illegal in several realities. Each one stamped, stacked, sorted, filed. Kex watched, stunned. He began. I didn't know paperwork could look heroic. Marcus winked. Stick around, rookie. We've got a dress code violation in the Reaper wardrobe department, 2 timelines trying to marry each other, and someone's accidentally resurrected a llama from the 12th century. Kex blinked. Is that a problem? Marcus shrugged. Only if it applies for sentience. Death turned toward the break room. I'll put on a fresh pot. They said, anyone want tea? Only if it's the end of all things blend, Marcus called out. You know it, Death replied, already halfway to the kettle. Kex sat in the humming desk chair, a stack of forms blinking at him with cosmic urgency. For the first time since arriving, he cracked a smile. Maybe extinction could wait. And then he says, that's not a cursed soul shard, that's my lunch. Marcus let out a wheezy laugh, nearly snorting his coffee, as he leaned against the humming, reality-warping water cooler. Beside him, Zix, the crystalline alien efficiency auditor from the Galactic Council, flickered in visible confusion. You laugh about soul misplacement? Zix asked, the light refraction across their form rippling like a stress signal. Oh, absolutely, Marcus grinned. Water cooler gossip is where all the best stories live. It's how we survive here. I don't understand. Zix turned toward the water cooler, peering at the glowing tank. This is a designated hydration station, correct? Technically, yes, Marcus replied. But functionally, it's a cross-dimensional confession booth, exorcism chamber, and the single most reliable information relay in the multiverse. He patted the cooler's side lovingly. It gurgled in response, possibly in appreciation, or possibly as a warning. Zix blinked. And your staff gathers here to exchange inefficient anecdotes. Not inefficient, Marcus corrected. Informationally dense in unpredictable vectors. Big difference. Death, who had just emerged from a nearby filing corridor labeled reboots and unscheduled returns, strolled over holding a mug that read, "World's best boss, literally I checked." "They're quite effective," Death said, sipping what might have been black tea, or the void between time. Approximately 37% of interdepartmental crisis resolutions originate from water cooler conversations. 37%. Zix gasped. But the manuals, Marcus interrupted, don't account for sentient gossip. At that exact moment, the water cooler hissed, bubbled, and projected a tiny hologram of a minor chaos deity misfiling soul routes. Marcus squinted at the image. "Oh, look, Misha's back, and she's still filing reincarnations alphabetically by middle name. That's going to unravel at least 5 destinies if we don't intervene." "See," Death said casually. "Efficient." Zix stared. "This is madness." "This is HR," Marcus said. "We're in the business of managing what everyone else would rather pretend doesn't exist. Souls. Death. Cosmic ethics. Tuesday meetings." "Especially Tuesday meetings," Death agreed solemnly. "They're cursed." Just then, the paperwork tentacle, now repurposed as a mobile intern named Filbert, slid past balancing 3 data pads and a tray of coffee. Marcus waved. "Filbert, did you get the memo on the reincarnation audit?" Filbert gurgled affirmatively and gave a thumbs up. At least, it looked like a thumbs up. It might have been an upside-down spiral of legal jargon. Zix's form began oscillating in mild panic. None of this conforms to Council Procedure 7A. Marcus put an arm around the crystalline auditor's shoulder. "Zix, my friend, I want you to think of the Council's procedures like a helpful suggestion. Sort of like assembly instructions for furniture. You can follow them exactly, or you can use intuition and half a bottle of coffee to make a filing system out of chair parts. That's the human way," Marcus said proudly. "Improvise. Adapt. Document everything." Zix looked over at the cooler. It let out a soft chuckle. Yes, the water cooler laughed. "I need to sit down," Zix muttered. "You're already standing in a dimensionally compressed ergonomic field," Death noted helpfully. "You're technically both sitting and standing. I need to go. There's a bathroom that exists outside of time," Marcus offered. "Great acoustics." Zix shimmered purple. "Never mind." As the alien auditor staggered away, Marcus poured himself another half-cup from the cooler. The liquid shimmered with the color of dreams and post-it notes. He turned to Death. "So, boss, did you hear about the Destiny Fate poker game last night?" Death nodded. "Fate won again." "Cheated," Marcus said. "Used prophetic blinks. Destiny's requesting a rematch with a blindfold." Death sipped. "I'll allow it." And with that, the 2 most absurdly qualified HR administrators in the universe leaned against the water cooler and resumed the sacred right of office gossip, balancing life, death, and small talk in perfect absurdity. Marcus didn't even flinch when the first drawer exploded. He calmly ducked as a swirl of bureaucratic forms shot out from the interdimensional cabinet, labeled Unfiled Realities. One of the forms buzzed past his ear and stapled itself aggressively to the corkboard across the room. The corkboard squeaked in protest. Yup, Marcus muttered, sipping his coffee. Definitely a Class 3 bureaucratic cascade. Zix, on the other hand, had crawled halfway under his desk, his crystalline limbs flashing red-orange. Why is the paper fighting back? It's not fighting, Marcus said. It's asserting territorial dominance. That drawer hadn't been organized since War and Peace tried to co-author a galactic census. Another drawer popped open, spewing a cloud of glowing ink and screaming documentation. A tentacle emerged, made entirely of densely packed, animate paperwork. Filbert, Marcus called. That you, buddy? The tentacle wiggled in acknowledgement, then straightened its collar, which, yes, it now had, and floated a tray of snacks onto the central filing table. Death entered the room right on cue, their presence bringing a sudden hush to the otherwise chaotic office storm. A mild flick of their skeletal fingers, and the floating files paused mid-rampage, hovering in place like curious ghosts caught in a disciplinary staff meeting. I see Filbert has evolved again. Death noted calmly. Promoted, Marcus said, mouth half full of a cookie that may or may not have been extra-dimensional. He's now officially an assistant coordinator for anomalous filing behaviors. The paperwork tentacle spun joyfully, then pulled out a clipboard and offered Death a form to sign. Death obliged with a flourish. Excellent formatting. Zix peeked out from under the desk. That thing is part of the office now. Oh, yeah, Marcus grinned. He's in the union. Zix slowly climbed back up, brushing off residual punctuation. Your filing systems are alive. Some of them, Marcus replied. We tried sentient filing cabinets last year. Didn't work. They kept reorganizing themselves alphabetically by existential theme. That sounds unstable. It was, someone labeled hope under, H instead of delusions. Caused a whole optimism leak in Sector 9. Another drawer rumbled. Filbert waved it off, passing Marcus a hot beverage. It fizzed slightly and glowed mauve. What is this? Marcus asked, curious. Pandimensional chai. Death explained. Stabilizes mood across timelines. Slight chance of déjà vu or spontaneous insight. Zix watched in awe as Marcus downed it in one gulp. I suddenly understand the plot of Inception, Marcus muttered, eyes wide. Death nodded. Side effect. Will fade. From across the room came a strange, whirring sound. The punch bowl, which had not been plugged into anything, began to shimmer. The walls flexed. Marcus looked at the bowl, then at Death. Did someone reroute the metaphysical stress channels again? Possibly. Death mused. I believe Chaos was using the break room microwave. Again. Marcus sighed. That thing wasn't rated for variable entropy snacks. Zix raised a hand. What constitutes a variable entropy snack? Marcus held up a plastic-wrapped item labeled Schroding nuts. They're both stale and fresh until observed. Just then, a rift in space-time cracked open over the filing cabinets, spilling paradox fog. A floating bulletin board followed, covered in sticky notes that shimmered like prophecy. Ugh, Marcus said. Timeline bleed. Probably from Fate's department. We should invite them to next week's potluck, Death said. Bridge some interdepartmental tension. Great idea. We'll need T-47 forms and snack requisition papers. Filbert waved again. 2 arms already producing relevant forms, and 1 placing cookies on the table with uncanny grace. Zix slowly turned in place, staring at the reality-warping snacks, the sentient filing in turn, the hovering fog, and the peacefully humming coffee machine in the corner. This is chaos. No, Marcus corrected gently. This is HR chaos. Death raised a mug. Managed chaos. The best kind. All right, team, Marcus clapped his hands, standing in the center of the HR office's reconfigured break room. Let's settle the interdimensional rift the proper way. He paused for dramatic effect. With charades, there was a brief silence. The punch bowl burbled ominously in the background. Zix's crystalline form flickered a pale chartreuse. You want to resolve an unstable interdepartmental paradox with a party game? Yes, Marcus said confidently. But not just any party game. Interdimensional charades. Filbert, now wearing a glittering sash labeled Entertainment Coordinator, raised 3 paperwork tendrils in what could only be interpreted as enthusiastic approval. One of the tendrils produced a top hat from nowhere and gently placed it atop Death's skull. Death looked festive. Explain, Zix said, watching as the snack table expanded into 4 dimensions to accommodate a temporal cheese platter. Marcus tapped the wall panel and a holographic scoreboard materialized. See, charades is a universal diplomacy tool. It levels the playing field. No words, just vibes. And chaos loves vibes. And this helps stabilize the paradox. How? Because Marcus said, donning a neon necktie that flickered through timelines, entropy responds best to social structure disguised as disorder. Just then, entropy arrived. Or, rather, entropy ooze-sloshed through the air, Vent wearing a disco ball hat, 5 scarves, and exactly 1 sock. It wobbled into the center of the room and struck a pose. Oh, good, Death said. They remembered the dress code. Entropy shifted into something vaguely humanoid and picked up the first clue card. The lights dimmed, the air tightened, and thus began the most unhinged round of charades in universal history. Entropy mimed a box, then burst out of it, then somersaulted into a fridge and vanished, only to emerge upside down in a reflection and waggle what may have been elbows. Marcus squinted. Schrodinger's delivery service. Filbert slapped a buzzer. Correct. Yes, Marcus fist-pumped. Who's next? Zix, still glowing with confusion, was handed a clue card by Filbert. It shimmered in paradox script. I don't think I can read this. You're not supposed to, Marcus said. Just interpret. Zix took the floor nervously and mimed a spinning cube, a tangle, a time-looped high five. Entropy squealed in delight. Marcus guessed, fate tripping over causality during a budget meeting? Buzzer. Death raised a hand. Scheduling paradox involving 2 mutually exclusive destinies attempting to co-sign a soul contract. Ding. Filbert exploded confetti into the air. Impressive, Marcus said. I had that on my bingo card. 1 by 1 manifestations from chaos, bureaucracy, probability, and even an intern from narrative took their turns. They mimed office gossip, rogue timelines, missing lunch reports, and the cosmic awkwardness of seeing your alternate self wearing the same outfit to a universal convergence. The chaos was precise. The madness organized. By the end of round 6, entropy had calmed, the paradox pulse stabilized, and the break room was once again humming in comfortable absurdity. Zix stood by the snack table, still holding a party hat in disbelief. That worked. Told you, Marcus said, sipping a cup of punch that now tasted like Tuesday and optimism. Chaos likes rules it can break playfully. Charades, Zix murmured, is a galactic stabilizer. Death nodded, adjusting their party top hat. Every era has its rituals. Once it was duels at dawn. Now it's competitive interpretive failure. Filbert handed out forms labeled post-event emotional recalibration survey and offered entropy a muffin. It immediately phased through 3 dimensions and began to cry from joy. Or was it leaking? Hard to say. Marcus high-fived Zix. Welcome to HR. If there was one thing the HR department of Death did better than filing existential paperwork, it was hosting absurdly overprepared office potlucks. Marcus stood at the head of the table, now stretched across at least 3 dimensions, examining a dish labeled emotionally aged lasagna, may contain regret, with appropriate caution. "Who brought this?" he asked, poking the slightly quivering top layer with a spork. "I think narrative did," Filbert the tentacle replied, slithering by while balancing 7 covered dishes and 1 semi-sentient casserole labeled backstory bake. Across the office, the punch bowl glowed a soft teal, the universal sign of safe for most species, and someone had set up a food labeling station complete with allergen symbols for time, irony, and gluten. Zix entered cautiously, carrying a crystalline dish that seemed to hum. "I brought something. It's a traditional Valachian clarity loaf. Helps with multidimensional digestion." Marcus squinted at the dish. "Is it supposed to emit wisdom when sliced?" "Yes. Cool." Death floated in wearing a chef's apron that read, "I bring the end of hunger," and placed a glowing tray of end times enchiladas on the central table. "I used a void pepper reduction," they announced. "May cause mild premonitions." Marcus nodded appreciatively. "Just how I like them. Spicy with a hint of apocalypse." Entropy oozed in next, wearing oven mitts and a chef's hat made of stars, carrying what looked like a cluster of hot blinking muffins. It set them down and bowed dramatically. "Are they safe?" Zix asked, inching back. Entropy burbled happily and conjured a handwritten note. "Quantum blueberry collapse cakes. Eat with caution. Time may stutter." Marcus clapped his hands. "All right, folks. Welcome to the annual multiversal HR department potluck and Unity lunch. This year's theme, fusion and flavor." The room shimmered, literally. The conference table gently vibrated as different spatial realities overlapped. A platter of probability salad shifted textures based on who was observing it. The mood, surprisingly festive. Filbert distributed dimensional cutlery. 1 fork bent time slightly. Another gave unsolicited financial advice in Latin. Zix looked dazed. "Your potlucks are impossible." "Technically, yes," Marcus said, "but also delicious." Death carved into a wedge of temporal cheese. The smell caused a ripple in the space-time wall. "Oh, that's aged through parallel timelines," Marcus noted. "The sharper the flavor, the more you feel your childhood regrets." Zix cautiously tasted a bite and blinked. "I suddenly remember the day I failed my first harmonics test." "Yep," Marcus smiled. "Pairs well with anxiety wine." As lunch progressed, conversation flowed like caffeinated gravity. Narrative traded muffin recipes with chaos. Bureaucracy was explaining its new snack classification system to Entropy, who was currently trying to fold a taco into a Mobius strip. Probability hosted a raffle for who might clean the dishes. Marcus lost. Then, without warning, the office lights dimmed. A single trumpet sounded, not from any known source, but from what Marcus could only assume was the idea of a trumpet. "Oh no," he muttered. "It's happening." From the break room doorway, Life entered. She was dressed in cascading vines, starlight, and a silk apron embroidered with "Bake it till you make it." In one hand, she carried a tray of evolving guacamole. Death said reverently, "Last time, it became self-aware." Life placed the bowl down. It pulsed gently. "Don't taunt it," she warned. Or it starts quoting philosophy. Zix watched as the guac blinked. "That dish has eyes." "It also has opinions," Marcus said. "Just nod and dip quietly." As the potluck reached its chaotic crescendo, Filbert clicked on the interdimensional camera, capturing the HR department at its most united, time debating chips with destiny, a slice of paradox cake floating between dimensions, and Marcus and Death toasting punch that briefly existed in the past and future simultaneously. Zix sipped their beverage. "I get it now." "Get what?" Marcus asked. "How humanity handles the absurdity of the universe." We don't, Marcus smiled. We just feed it snacks until it behaves. It started, as many disasters in Death's HR department did, with a filing error. Not a big one. Just a misfiled complaint about missing coffee filters in the fourth sub-basement of bureaucracy's physical archive wing. But when you're dealing with sentient paperwork and filing cabinets enchanted with basic awareness and a strong sense of hierarchy, that sort of mistake festers. By the time Marcus got the alert, the cabinets had unionized. Status, he asked, ducking as a flying folder labeled grievances. Century 42 zipped overhead. Zix clung to a hovering safety shelf, his crystalline limbs jittering in every light frequency of panic. They've barricaded the file room entrance and declared sovereignty. I believe they've named the new territory the Grand Filing Republic. Marcus sipped his coffee calmly. Did they at least fill out the proper revolution paperwork? They filed an I-97 notice of sentient asset rebellion. Filbert the Tentacle confirmed, sliding by with a clipboard and a tray of peace-offering pastries. Well, Marcus sighed. At least they're following form. The door burst open. Death entered with practiced poise, flanked by an aura of calm and quiet threat. I trust the revolution is on schedule. Approximately, Marcus replied. They're demanding laminated labels, equal drawer space, and an apology letter from Probability for rearranging their alphabetical order to suit a joke. Zix blinked. That's why this started. Oh, no, Marcus said. That was just the last straw. Filing cabinet C. 47 hasn't been properly cleaned since the collapse of Timeline 12 beta. The dust in there gained sentience and started holding philosophy seminars. Filbert floated a sign, written in glowing red ink. No justice, no sorting. A second, slightly smaller cabinet held a placard that read, "We will not be categorized." Death raised a hand. "I will attempt negotiation." Zix grabbed Marcus's arm. "Is that wise? These cabinets are unstable." "That's what mediation snacks are for," Marcus replied, and handed over a bag of calming cheese crisps. Inside the barricaded file room, the cabinets buzzed and rattled like a paper hive. Marcus, Death, and Filbert entered slowly, offering snacks and updated label makers with adjustable fonts. "We recognize your grievances," Marcus began, holding up a copy of the HR complaints ledger, section, rebellion subsection, furniture. "You've been denied basic maintenance, fair filing practices, and meaningful categorization. One drawer hissed in tentative approval. We come with solutions," Death said, opening a briefcase that emitted a low, harmonic chime. "First, ergonomic reorganization plans. Second, access to the Reality Catalog Index. And third," Death produced a scroll. "Full recognition as a subdepartment of bureaucratic storage. With holiday pay." The cabinets conferred in rumbles and paper flips. Filbert produced a tea tray mid-negotiation. One of the cabinets cautiously took a muffin. After tense moments, the lead cabinet clicked open. It released a peace treaty document with gold trim. Marcus signed. Death countersigned. Filbert added sprinkles. Thus, the uprising was resolved. "Well done," Death said as they exited the chamber. "That could have unraveled causality." Marcus nodded. "Crisis averted." And I scheduled a mediation seminar. Title: From Filing to Feeling, Listening to Your Sentient Office Equipment. "Excellent," Death said. Zix, stunned, asked, "Is this normal?" "This is Tuesday," Marcus replied. Marcus knew something was wrong the moment he entered the main office and saw Death adjusting their tie with both hands, something they only did when stressed. "Performance reviews again?" Marcus asked, cautiously setting his coffee on the desk before it could become self-aware. Death nodded with the sort of weary grace only possible for an ancient force of inevitability. "It's that time." "Time." Zix echoed, stepping into the room behind him. Isn't time currently in a passive-aggressive standoff with causality about vacation hours? Exactly, Marcus muttered. So now we have to review everything ourselves. He picked up a stack of glowing files labeled feedback from fundamental entities and flipped one open. Entity, war. Reviewer, peace. Rating, needs improvement. Still shouting. Classic. Marcus sighed. Filbert slithered in, wearing a miniature tie and carrying a clipboard 4 times his size. With one tentacle, he handed Death a feedback packet. With another, he offered Zix a cookie labeled emotionally stabilized oatmeal. Zix took the cookie without question. The room was already shifting, gently warping as manifest concepts began arriving for their scheduled reviews. Order entered precisely on time, carrying a binder with labeled tabs, color-coded charts, and bullet points. Chaos appeared 5 minutes late, upside down, wearing sunglasses and eating a banana. Shall we begin? Marcus asked, already dreading it. Let's. Death sighed. First review, entropy. Entropy oozed into the room, swirling in glitter and wearing a t-shirt that read, "Dissolve me gently." Marcus handed over the form. Please describe one professional goal you met this quarter. Entropy burbled, then used its pseudopod to etch, successfully reduced cohesion in the emotional attachment cluster. Great, Marcus said. Follow-up question, did you intend to? Entropy made a shrugging motion, then winked. Somehow, Death scribbled something on their form under needs intent clarification. Second review, time. Time didn't walk in so much as unfold into the room from multiple directions. She looked like every clock, hourglass, and fleeting memory rolled into one sleepless project manager. I see you requested a raise again, Marcus said. I've accrued overtime across 600 parallel realities. Time replied dryly. Denied. We can't afford another singularity-level union dispute. Death said firmly. Time sighed, dissolved into calendar-shaped mist, and filed a complaint with HR, while still in the room. Marcus noted the incident as temporally simultaneous feedback conflict. Third review, Death. Zix blinked. Wait, you're reviewing yourself. Death nodded solemnly and sat down. Every entity must be held accountable. Even me. Marcus handed over the form. List one area where you feel you've improved. Death paused, tapping a skeletal finger to their chin. I've started using more accessible metaphors. Zix nodded. That's true. I understood your last memo about existential unraveling. And your biggest challenge? Marcus asked. Death looked out the window at the stars, making the end feel less like loss and more like closure. The silence lingered. Even chaos didn't interrupt. Zix scribbled on his sheet, then quietly offered a glowing jelly pen. Death accepted it, wrote trying, then placed the pen down with care. As the reviews wrapped up, Marcus filed everything with meticulous attention. The forms glowed gently. They're magic-bound, not just by logic, but by honesty. You know, Zix said, looking at the stack, this doesn't feel like bureaucracy. Marcus smiled. That's because real reviews, good ones, aren't about punishment. They're about reflection, improvement, understanding. He sipped his coffee. Even Death needs feedback sometimes. Filbert dinged a small bell, signaling the close of evaluations. Outside the door, Life peeked in. Did I miss mine? No, Marcus said, checking the schedule. Your next quarter, along with love and, oh no. What? Zix asked. Marcus turned pale. Customer service. Death groaned. Not again. The end of all things arrived on a Thursday, which was inconvenient because Marcus had just refilled the office coffee machine. The warning came not as a trumpet nor a rift in the sky, but as a memo delivered by a flaming raven wearing glasses and a necktie. Marcus read it calmly, coffee in hand. So, the universe is scheduled to end today. Zix dropped his clipboard. What? Death, who had just sat down with a fresh cup of Earl Grey, nodded. Ah, yes, the final unraveling. I'd forgotten it was this week. You forgot the apocalypse? Zix squeaked. It's been rescheduled so many times. Death replied, checking their calendar. And Marcus handles the logistics now. Marcus was already scrolling through forms. Okay, let's see. I need the S99 for sudden cessation of reality, the F444 apocalypse notification, and a full series of WZs for widespread zoning collapse. Filbert floated in, wearing an apron that read "Last Snacks Ever," and began distributing muffins laced with metaphysical comfort. Zix blinked. I'm sorry, but why is no one panicking? Marcus sipped his coffee. Because Zix, the apocalypse, is honestly just a paperwork event. Do you know how many pre-collapse forms we've already filed? All that's left is cross-checking, assigning entity witnesses, and making sure the snack table doesn't destabilize. Death pointed, which it nearly did last time. Entropy got into the salsa. A low rumble echoed through the office. The walls shimmered with the soft flicker of fading constants. Reality was beginning to soften around the edges. Colors grew oversaturated, and logic started to drift like lazy snow. Marcus tapped a blinking icon on his tablet. Right. Step 1. Notify departments. A multiversal PA system crackled to life. Attention all staff. Final unraveling is scheduled for 3:42 p.m. local multitemporal standard. Please ensure all snack-based anomalies are labeled. And remember, no last-minute existential revelations without proper clearance. Zix stared at him. You can't just manage the end of everything. That's where you're wrong, Marcus said. That's exactly what we do. By 3:15 p.m., the HR department looked oddly festive. The apocalypse had brought out the best in them. Time had baked cupcakes that somehow slowed entropy. War was handing out homemade chili. Love was leading a sing-along. Even bureaucracy had relaxed slightly and allowed chairs that didn't look like medieval torture devices. At 3:39 p.m., the lights dimmed. The final countdown began. Literally, time had cued it on the sound system. 3 minutes, Filbert announced cheerfully. Death stood near the window, watching the stars begin to go out one by one. It's always beautiful. Will it hurt? Zix asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. No, not this time. We streamlined it. Zix blinked. But what happens after? Death gave a small smile. We clock out. At 3:42 p.m., the universe unraveled, but not in fire or fury. Instead, the stars folded like origami, the void gave a polite nod, and everything paused, not stopped, not destroyed, just paused. A final form blinked into existence. Marcus filled it out with a glowing pen. End of cycle, approved. Death pressed the button. The coffee machine brewed. One last, perfect cup. Somewhere outside of time, on a quiet beach of nothing, the HR department of Death set up a folding table, poured drinks, and watched the tide of cosmic foam roll back. Zix sat beside Marcus, stunned. We're still here. Of course, Marcus said, handing him a biscuit. You think a little thing like the end of existence gets us a day off? Death raised their mug. To endings, they said, and to all the forms in between. Everyone toasted, and then the stars began blinking back on. Just one, then another, then a whole new spreadsheet of possibility. I think it's time, Marcus said, standing and stretching. Let's clock in.